You think you would never hurt someone. You believe with absolute certainty that your moral compass is fixed, a reliable guide that would never allow you to inflict pain on another human being. You see yourself as a good person, fundamentally decent and kind. But what if I told you that science says you might be wrong? What if the line separating good from evil is not a concrete wall, but a permeable, shifting boundary? This isn't a hypothetical exercise in philosophy. It is a chilling conclusion drawn from decades of psychological research. The capacity for great evil, it turns out, lies dormant within ordinary people, waiting for the right situation to awaken it. This is not a comfortable thought. We prefer to believe that evil is something external, something that belongs to them, the monsters, the psychopaths, the aberrations of humanity. We create a psychological buffer, assuring ourselves that we are different, that our inherent goodness would prevail against any corrupting influence. In 1961 at Yale University, a psychologist named Stanley Milgram designed an experiment to understand obedience to authority. Participants were told they were part of a study on memory and learning. They were assigned the role of teacher and tasked with administering electric shocks to a learner in another room for every wrong answer. The learner, an actor, would grunt, shout, and eventually fall silent as the voltage increased. The shocks were fake, but the teacher's distress was terrifyingly real. A man in a gray lab coat, the authority figure, "The experiment requires that you continue," he would say calmly. "Please go on." What would you do? Most people, when asked, insist they would stop immediately. They claim they would never inflict pain just because someone in a uniform told them to. Yet, Milgram's results tell a different, horrifying story. A staggering 65% of participants continued to administer shocks up to the maximum level of 450 volts, a switch clearly marked XXX. They sweated, they trembled, they pleaded to stop, but when the authority figure insisted, the majority obeyed. They became instruments of another's will, their own moral objections overridden by the simple command to continue. 10 years after Milgram's study, a research team at Stanford University set out to investigate a related question. Their aim, to understand what happens when ordinary people are placed in an environment designed to test the boundaries of morality and authority. The experiment asked, what occurs when good people are immersed in a setting shaped by power and control? Would the participants' inherent decency prevail, or would the environment's corrupting influence override their values? A simulated prison was constructed in the basement of the psychology department, complete with cells and barred doors. Healthy, psychologically stable college students were randomly assigned to the roles of prisoner or guard. Uniforms and simple instructions were provided. The guards were instructed to maintain order within the prison. Prisoners were stripped, deloused, and given numbers instead of names. Although the experiment was intended to last 2 weeks, it was halted after only 6 days due to escalating distress. The transformation was rapid and disturbing. Students who had been peaceful and friendly soon adopted authoritarian and even cruel behaviors as guards. Guards subjected prisoners to humiliating punishments, sleep deprivation, and psychological torment. Prisoners became passive, helpless, and emotionally fragile, with some experiencing acute breakdowns. The situation itself proved powerful enough to overwhelm the individual personalities and values of these otherwise well-adjusted young men. The roles assigned, guard or prisoner, shaped behavior dramatically. Uniforms, mirrored sunglasses, and nightsticks became symbols of authority, granting permission for actions that would have been unthinkable outside the experiment. The outcome was not the result of a few bad individuals, but of a powerful environment, a bad barrel that corrupted those within it. Prisoners, stripped of identity, began to internalize their roles as powerless and inferior. The boundary between acting and genuine feeling dissolved, revealing how quickly self-concept can be dismantled by social forces. The Stanford prison experiment revealed that systems and situations can exert more influence than individual character. Uniforms, titles, and ideologies can grant permission for abuse, even without explicit orders. The experiment stands as a stark warning about the dangers of unchecked power and the corrupting potential of institutions. It raises a haunting question. In a similar situation, would one become the guard who abuses power or the one who resists? Why do we obey? The tendency to follow orders from a perceived legitimate authority is a deeply ingrained human behavior. It's essential for the functioning of any society. From childhood, we are taught to listen to parents, teachers, police officers. This instinct for obedience is a social lubricant, allowing for order and cooperation. However, this same instinct can be weaponized. When an authority figure commands us to act against our conscience, a powerful internal conflict erupts. As the Milgram experiment demonstrated, the pressure to obey often wins. That override of personal morality is called the agentic state. Individuals in the agentic state no longer see themselves as responsible. They view themselves as an agent, a mere instrument carrying out someone else's wishes. That shift lets them perform acts they'd normally find abhorrent. Responsibility is deferred to the authority figure. "I was just doing my job," or "I was just following orders," becomes the haunting refrain. This mental loophole absolves guilt and preserves self-image as a good person while participating in evil. History offers countless examples. Consider Adolf Eichmann, a bland, methodical bureaucrat. Documents and transport schedules he organized, trains and deportation imagery from the Holocaust, Hannah Arendt and her phrase, "the banality of evil." This deference to authority isn't only historical. An employee asked to fudge numbers, a soldier ordered to carry out an unethical command, a citizen encouraged by a political leader to harass others. In each case, a choice: defy and risk consequences, or obey and compromise integrity. The discomfort of defiance often makes obedience feel easier and safer. Understanding this dynamic is crucial to resisting it. It is not just a person in a lab coat who can make us do wrong. Sometimes the authority is the crowd itself. Humans are social creatures, wired for connection and belonging. This deep-seated need to fit in makes us highly susceptible to the influence of the group, a phenomenon known as conformity. We look to others for cues on how to behave, what to believe, and even what to feel. This is often harmless, like laughing at a joke because everyone else is. But this same impulse can have a much darker side. When a group embraces a harmful belief or action, the pressure to conform can be immense. The psychologist Solomon Asch demonstrated this power in a simple yet profound experiment. He asked participants to match the length of a line with 3 other options. The task was easy, but the participant was in a room with several actors, all instructed to give the same, obviously wrong answer. Faced with a unanimous but incorrect majority, about 75% of participants conformed at least once, agreeing with the group's wrong answer. They knew it was incorrect, but the psychological pressure to not stand out, to not be the lone dissenter, was too strong to resist. They chose social comfort over objective reality. This desire to not make waves can lead to a dangerous passivity known as the bystander effect. When someone is in distress, the presence of other people can inhibit our impulse to help. We assume someone else will intervene, a diffusion of responsibility. We look around, and when we see that no one else is acting, we take that as a cue that action is not required. This collective inaction allows terrible things to happen in plain sight. From street assaults to workplace bullying, the silent consent of the group empowers the perpetrator and abandons the victim. Each individual's inaction reinforces the inaction of others, creating a powerful paralysis. De-individuation is an even more extreme form of group influence. When we are part of a large crowd or wearing a uniform, our personal identity can feel submerged. We become anonymous, less accountable for our actions. This sense of anonymity can lower our inhibitions and make us more likely to engage in impulsive, deviant, and sometimes violent behavior. Think of riots, lynch mobs, or even the vitriol of an online comment section. People do and say things in the anonymity of a crowd that they would never dream of doing as identifiable individuals. The group provides both a shield and a permission slip for our darkest impulses. How can a person bring themselves to harm another human being? The answer often lies in a single, sinister psychological process: dehumanization. This is the mental act of stripping away the humanity of another person or group, recasting them as less than human. Once someone is seen as an object, an animal, a pest, a statistic, the moral injunction against harming them is disabled. It is a cognitive switch that turns off empathy. Dehumanization is not a byproduct of conflict. It is the essential precondition for sustained, systematic cruelty. You cannot enslave, torture, exterminate people you see as fully human. This process is often driven by propaganda and ideology. Language is a powerful tool. When leaders refer to a group of people as vermin, cockroaches, infestations, animals, they are not just using crude insults. They are actively rewiring the brains of their followers. This language frames the target group as a threat or a contamination that must be cleansed. It makes violence seem not only permissible but necessary, a logical, even righteous solution to a problem. This rhetorical trick has been used by perpetrators of genocide throughout history. Nazis describing Jews as rats, Hutu extremists in Rwanda calling Tutsis cockroaches. Once dehumanization takes hold, the capacity for empathy is shut down. Neurological studies have shown that when we see someone we perceive as part of our in-group, the parts of our brain associated with social cognition and empathy light up. But when we view someone from a dehumanized out-group, these brain regions show significantly less activity. We literally stop seeing them as a thinking, feeling person like ourselves. They become an it instead of a you. This neurological short circuit makes it possible for ordinary soldiers, guard citizens, to commit acts of extreme violence without feeling the full horror of their actions. Dehumanization is not just a tool of dictators and genocidal regimes, it seeps into our everyday lives in subtle but corrosive ways. We see it in the language we use to talk about political opponents, immigrants, the homeless. We see it in online arguments where people are reduced to avatars and labels. Every time we reduce a complex human being to a simplistic negative stereotype, we are engaging in a mild form of dehumanization. It is a slippery slope. The mental habit of seeing others as less than human, even in small ways, makes it easier to justify indifference, discrimination, cruelty. We have walked through the unsettling evidence from psychology and history. We have walked through the unsettling evidence from psychology and history. We have seen how the pressure of authority can make us administer shocks to a stranger. We have seen how a simple uniform can turn students into tyrants. We have confronted the power of the group to make us doubt our own eyes and stand by while others suffer. We have learned how the language of dehumanization can flip the switch that allows for unimaginable cruelty. The chilling truth is undeniable. The line between good and evil is not fixed. It is permeable and can be crossed by anyone under the right or wrong situational pressures. So we must return to the initial question, but with new and troubling insight. You still believe you are a good person. You still believe you would resist. But can you be so sure? Would you be the 1/3 of Milgram's participants who defied the man in the lab coat, or part of the 2/3 who obeyed? Would you be the prisoner who resisted, or the guard who became lost in his power? It is easy to claim heroism from the comfort of your chair. It is infinitely harder to be the lone voice of dissent when the pressure to conform is crushing, when an authority is demanding your obedience, and when a system is giving you permission to be cruel. This is not a message of despair, but one of urgent awareness. The Lucifer effect, the transformation of good people into perpetrators of evil, is not inevitable. Its power comes from our ignorance of it. By understanding these psychological forces, we can learn to recognize and resist them. We can teach ourselves to question authority, to think critically about group consensus, and to reject the language of dehumanization. We can cultivate what I call the heroic imagination, the capacity to envision ourselves acting heroically and to prepare ourselves to stand up, to speak out, and to act when the moment comes. Heroism is not a character trait, it is a choice. The ultimate battle between good and evil is not fought on a grand cosmic stage. It is fought in the small, everyday decisions made by ordinary people. It is the choice to help or to look away. It is the choice to obey an unjust order or to refuse. It is the choice to see the humanity in others or to reduce them to a label. The potential for great darkness resides in all of us, a quiet passenger waiting for the right conditions to take the wheel. The crucial question is not whether this darkness exists,